Hello, this video will walk you through how to complete the rotation summary form. This is meant to be a tentative schedule for your dietetic internship and is meant for those applying to our DI standalone or for our MSDI students preparing for their internship. Instructions are listed throughout the form. If you click on a box, it will tell you exactly what you need to include. We ask that you include information as thorough as possible. For information such as your bare email, this is only for those who are already UNC students, and you may forego that box if you are not a UNC student. Otherwise, please fill out everything to the best of your ability. This is tentative, so we recognize some of this information will change, including whether or not you're choosing to rotate full-time or part-time. So please just indicate what your plan is, and we can come back and change that at a later time. As well as your concentration. We have 3 concentration areas from which to choose. You're also welcome to indicate undecided if you have not yet decided. This is where you will indicate specifics about each of your rotations. We have an example listed in the first line, and then you can use the remaining lines to fill in your information. You likely won't need all of these lines, and if you need more, you can insert additional lines. Now, you may need to scroll side to side to see all of the information. You can also change the size of the screen in order to see more information all at once. Please, to the best of your ability, indicate everything that you can on this form. Starting with tentative rotation dates. If you are just starting to complete this form, it's very likely that you do not have dates, even tentative dates, outlined yet, so you're welcome to leave this blank. However, if your preceptor has indicated which dates they prefer, please indicate those. Even if it's a general indication such as September, October, or something like that, in order to keep yourself organized and to give us an indication of when you plan to complete that rotation. If your preceptor has indicated that you will only be rotating, let's say, on Saturdays and Sundays, or that they only are there Monday through Thursday, you're welcome to indicate that here. So if this is a rotation where they perform their functions on weekends, then you're welcome to indicate so. Here is where you can indicate the tentative number of rotation hours. You're welcome to input a range of what you and your preceptor have discussed. And then when it comes time to confirm those rotation hours, please input that here. Here is where you will indicate the rotation type. So let's say, for example, this next rotation is your long-term care. And the long-term care hours are going to be counted toward clinical. When you hover over the clinical box and then click on the drop-down, there are several options from which to choose for clinical. So you would choose the clinical LTC option. When we're looking at clinical, you notice that there are options for inpatient, outpatient, inpatient, and outpatient. We request that one of your facilities is an inpatient facility at least. But that facility may also serve the outpatient population as well. So you are welcome, if you have a hospital that has outpatient clinics as well, and you'll be rotating there, you're welcome to choose that option for clinical, inpatient, and outpatient. If that's the case, we will request that you indicate an idea, a rough estimate of how many hours will be spent inpatient and how many will be spent outpatient, because we do prefer to see more of your hours spent inpatient. And depending upon how your entire rotation schedule looks, we may need to make some adjustments there. If you know it's a clinical facility, but you're not entirely sure which population you'll be serving at the time that you fill this form out, you're welcome to just choose clinical, and then we can revisit it when the time comes to make sure you are getting the rotation hours that you require. Now you'll notice as I clicked clinical in these 3 boxes that these became red over here. The reason being, when you have a clinical facility, we're going to ask you the bed count and also the accreditation status. As mentioned, we require one facility at least to be an inpatient facility. We also require that facility to have 80 or more beds and be accredited by either DNV or JCAO, the Joint Commission. So you have the option to choose. If you do not know, you can look that information up online. If you can't seem to find that information, please leave this blank rather than guessing, because we will assume if you indicate that it is accredited, that you have looked that up, you have confirmed that information. Same with the bed count. So we ask you to either indicate, yes, it's greater than 80 beds, or no, it's not, or NA. So for this one, for the LTC, it's going to be NA. And same for the outpatient center. Because remember, only the inpatient clinical site is the one that we are going to be looking at for that bed count. So just as placeholders, I'm going to be inputting this information here just to give us an idea of what it's meant to look like. Now, the other rotation types are your community, your food service, and your concentration rotation. So for community, there's only one option, it's community. And then for food service, we have food service, LTC, or any other food service. This could be hospital, this could be school, this could be a private practice that hosts cooking classes that you'll be facilitating. And then as for your concentration, we ask you to indicate which concentration you have chosen. If you know that these hours are going to be spent toward concentration, but your concentration is yet to be decided, then you're welcome to indicate so here. As for the other information, please fill it out as noted. We have a notes column here for you, so if you would like to leave a note to yourself or to us, you can put that here. And then please also input the contact information of your preceptor. If you have an alternate contact, whether that's a secondary preceptor or an individual who you've been communicating with in order to facilitate the rotation who may not be your preceptor, but is someone that you've been contacting, you can input their information here. If you do not have a second person, you can leave it blank or you can put NA. That is fine either way. Now, a couple of other notes here. We do allow facilities to compensate you for your time there. With that said, this is not the standard. It is really mainly for rotations in which the facility only has a paid position available, or they have a grant position and they're used to paying their interns. We do not expect you to go looking for a job and then ask them to be your preceptor. The primary focus of your internship is your internship. So please keep that in mind as you are seeking internship sites. Do not expect that they'll compensate you. And if they offer to, that's something that they would offer to you rather than you requesting that of them. You do need approval from the director. And that can be done either as you're filling this out or after this has already been submitted. But regardless, please indicate yes or no or unsure for this. And then again, if you have more notes regarding the contact people or the compensation, you can put them here. Everything after that that's listed in gray, please ignore. We will be using this after the program has begun or as we are reviewing your application. So leave that all blank. Now, the hours here will add up as you start inputting hours up here. So you'll notice that it'll remain in red until you indicate that you have the minimum number of hours. So now that I've got 300 clinical hours, which is the minimum for clinical, this will become white rather than red. However, you may notice that down here in long-term care, this has now become red. The reason for that is because we require a minimum of 40, but a maximum of 80 long-term care hours. So if you've got above 80 hours indicated as long-term care, that will become red. Now that I've adjusted it, this is now white. And so let's just pretend that I'll be doing some hours at this other facility. So now I've satisfied my clinical, I've satisfied my long-term care, and it shows me that I still have yet to secure hours for these. And once I do, once the total internship hours reaches 1,000, this will turn white. Again, this is tentative. So if you are missing some hours in one rotation, that's understandable. We do not expect that as you're completing this, you are good to go with every rotation area. If you are applying to our DI or if you are in our MSDI program and you are asked to submit this form, we will expect to see the majority of this filled out. With that said, if you're finding, you've got your community, you've got your food service, and maybe you're missing your concentration or something like that, or you've got half of your clinical, half of your community, and you're still missing the other 150 hours. That's okay too. You eventually do need to secure those hours, but we won't necessarily throw out this form if you haven't shown that you've met them all. We will just ask whether it's in your application, your interview, or if you're meeting with us as part of the program. We will expect to see that you have made headway and that you've reached out to preceptors and that they just have all not been able to host you, but that you've made those efforts. And then we can help you from there. The last component here is APL. It's Assessment of Prior Learning. This is something that you may apply for once you are in the program. And it can count toward up to 220 hours of either your food service or your community rotation. There is an application process that will be on a different video and a different page, but just keeping in mind that will be inputted here when the time comes. Something else I forgot to mention here is that this whole line became red. And why is that? Well, you'll notice that I chose 2 different rotation sites for this same line. So number one, it gets confused down here, so it's not sure which one to count it for. In fact, it looks like it's counting it toward both. So let's pretend that you have a facility, let's call it, let's say it's your WIC facility. They've indicated that they would like to do 100 of your nutrition ed hours, and that they would also like to spend additional time with you and maybe have an additional 100 hours toward community. We generally recommend that each rotation type is done at a completely unique facility in order to get a breadth and depth of variety. And we also recognize that sometimes you'll be doing 2 rotations at the same facility, as long as you're not spending the 2 full rotations at that facility. So if that's the case, we will then ask you to indicate these on 2 separate lines. So you'll still be at the WIC facility and you would indicate which WIC. Okay, so I'm just inputting WIC here for ease here. But you'll notice if I click on here and I click the delete button on my keyboard, it removes that and then it satisfies what we've been looking for here. And then I can indicate community and then it will auto-populate down below. So if this is the case for you, please indicate this on 2 separate lines and indicate which rotation and how many hours you plan to spend at each of those rotations. Another note about hours, as I mentioned previously, you are welcome to choose if you let's pretend, and I apologize for the typo here, but let's pretend we're going to community hospital and we are going to be rotating with the inpatient team as well as the outpatient team. Let's pretend you're going to spend 1 week, 40 hours with the outpatient team and then the remainder with inpatient. You can denote this a couple of different ways. If the timing is going to overlap, let's pretend you're spending 1 day a week with outpatient, you can indicate all of those hours together in one. So let's pretend this is going to be like July 1 through August 30th. And you're just going to spend 1 day a week outpatient or whatever they are wanting of you. You're welcome to input that here. So 40 hours outpatient or something to indicate that as so. Now let's just pretend you were going to spend all of this time inpatient and then come back for another week later in the year after you did all of your community. So in that case, we would encourage you just to indicate inpatient here. So I'm going to be spending all of this time inpatient and I'm only going to be doing 260 hours. And then later, starting January 1st through January 6th, let's say, I'm going to be doing 40 hours at community hospital again, but this time it's going to be clinical outpatient. So that way you've still got your 300 community hours at your 300 clinical hours at community hospital, but you've designated how many are inpatient and how many are outpatient. And if that's the case, you of course don't need to indicate here that some of these are going to be outpatient because they're not. They're all going to be inpatient. And then, of course, since this is it's still the hospital, it's still the community hospital, but it is outpatient. So you can either choose yes, because you know it's greater than 80 beds, or you can indicate not applicable because it's not applicable how many beds that hospital has, because you're not even going to be on the inpatient side that has the beds. You're going to be in the outpatient clinic. So there you have it, an overview of how to fill out the rotation summary form. If you are locating this on our website, we would highly encourage you to download it to your computer before starting to edit so that you can save it before sending it to us. If you have any questions, please email dietetic.internship@unco.edu.